I still remember the first day my son brought her home. Her name was Clara, and she had that shy smile that made you want to make her feel at ease. My son Daniel looked happier than I'd ever seen him, and in that moment I thought, finally my boy has found his peace. I opened my heart to her without hesitation. I cooked her favorite dishes, shared family stories, and tried to make her feel like she'd always belonged here. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to hear my story. If you're comfortable, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. In the beginning, everything felt like a warm dream. The laughter, the dinners, the plans for the future. Clara and I grew close. She'd sit in the kitchen with me, sipping tea while we talked about the smallest things, like how Daniel used to sneak cookies before dinner, or how she wanted to plant roses in the backyard. When she told us she was expecting, I thought my heart would burst. A grandchild. The word itself felt like music. I started knitting tiny sweaters before she even reached her second trimester. Every kick, every ultrasound photo she shared, I cherished as if it were my own heartbeat. But sometimes, when I looked at her, I caught something in her eyes, a flicker of worry, like she was holding her breath for something unseen. I brushed it off as new mother nerves. We all get scared before life changes forever. Little did I know, the fear I saw wasn't about becoming a mother. It was about the truth she was hiding deep within her heart. The day my grandson was born was one of those moments that etches itself into your soul. I remember the smell of the hospital, the sound of Daniel's voice trembling with joy, and the tiny cry that filled the room when they handed us that perfect little boy. His name was Michael. I remember thinking, he's got Daniel's nose, though something about his eyes, those deep, stormy eyes, felt different. Still, I dismissed it. Babies change. Eyes lighten. I was just overthinking. From that moment on, my world revolved around Michael. I would visit almost every day, bringing soup and little gifts. Clara seemed tired all the time, more than I remembered being at her age. Sometimes I'd walk in, and she'd be staring at him in the crib, her expression unreadable. I thought maybe she was just overwhelmed. Motherhood can do that. It can make you feel both blessed and buried. One afternoon, when Daniel was at work, I stopped by to drop off groceries. I found Clara sitting on the floor, holding Michael close, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. I froze, afraid to intrude, but before I could step back, she looked up. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. "Oh, hi. I didn't hear you come in," she whispered, quickly wiping her face. I smiled softly, pretending not to notice. "Just thought I'd surprise you with dinner." She thanked me, but her voice was distant. That moment lingered with me long after I went home. I couldn't shake it, the sadness in her, the kind that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from guilt. Still, I told myself not to meddle. Families need space, but deep down, a quiet unease began to grow. Sometimes, love blinds us more than hate ever could. As months passed, that unease began to whisper louder. There were small things at first, innocent, but strange enough to linger in my mind. Clara always hesitated when anyone mentioned Michael looking like his father. She'd smile politely, change the subject, or excuse herself. And once, I caught her deleting messages when Daniel walked into the room. She brushed it off as nothing, but my mother's intuition stirred uneasily inside me. I told myself not to interfere. My son was happy, my grandson was healthy, and Clara was kind to me. What more could I ask for? Yet, sometimes happiness isn't proof of peace. It's the mask we wear to keep the cracks from showing. One evening, Daniel brought over a stack of baby photos. "Look, Mom," he laughed. "Doesn't Michael look just like me when I was a baby?" I smiled, but my heart stung with confusion, because no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't see my son in that child's face. Not in the eyes, not in the smile. It was like staring at a beautiful painting that didn't belong in the gallery you knew so well. I wanted to speak, but what could I say? He doesn't look like you? That would be cruel, unfair. I pushed the thought aside and decided love was more important than resemblance. But that night, when I tucked myself into bed, the silence pressed too heavy. Something was wrong. Clara's quiet sadness, her distant eyes, her jumpiness around certain topics, it all began forming a shape I didn't want to see. And then, a few weeks later, life gave me the first clue I couldn't ignore. A photo, tucked inside a baby blanket that didn't belong to any of us. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I had stopped by to help Clara fold laundry while Michael napped. The sun was streaming through the curtains, warm and soft, and everything felt peaceful for once. I picked up one of Michael's baby blankets from the basket, shaking it lightly before folding, and that's when a small photograph fluttered out onto the floor. I bent down, expecting it to be something harmless, maybe a hospital photo or one of those candid moments Clara loved capturing. But when I turned it over, my stomach dropped. It was a picture of Clara, pregnant, glowing, but standing beside a man I had never seen before. His hand rested protectively over her belly, and the look they shared. It wasn't casual, it was love, deep, unmistakable love. For a long moment, I just stood there, frozen, the air thick with disbelief. Clara turned from the sink and saw me holding the photo. Her face drained of color. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In Michael's blanket," I said softly, still staring at the picture. She reached out as if to take it, but stopped halfway, trembling. I didn't say anything else. I simply placed the photo on the counter and quietly left the house. My hands were shaking the whole drive home. I told myself there had to be an explanation, but the image kept flashing in my mind, that man's arm around her, the tenderness in her eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. My heart begged me not to jump to conclusions, but my intuition, oh, that quiet, relentless whisper of truth, told me something had been hidden. Something that would change everything, and by morning, I knew I couldn't ignore it any longer. The next morning, I made a pot of tea I never touched. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I kept asking myself, what if it's nothing? What if I'm about to destroy my son's marriage over a misunderstanding? But then again, what if it wasn't? What if I'd been living in a lie so carefully constructed that love itself had become its disguise? I waited until evening to visit again. Daniel wasn't home. Clara opened the door, her eyes puffy and red, like she hadn't slept either. For a moment neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt heavier than words could ever be. "I think we need to talk," I finally said. She nodded, motioning for me to sit at the kitchen table. I placed the photograph between us. "Who is he?" I asked gently. Clara took a deep breath, her hands twisting in her lap. His name is Eric," she said after a long pause. "We were together before Daniel. It was serious, but things ended suddenly. I found out I was pregnant a few weeks later. The words hit me like cold water. She didn't have to finish. I already understood. So Daniel? He doesn't know." Tears welled in her eyes. "No, he doesn't. I thought about telling him, I really did. But then he proposed, and he was so happy, and I was scared. I thought I could just love Michael enough for all of us, that maybe love would make it right." I looked at her then, not with anger, but with the heartbreak of someone watching the foundation of her family crumble. "Secrets have a way of surfacing," I whispered. "And when they do, they hurt more than the truth ever could." She sobbed silently, and for the first time, I realized we were both victims of the same lie. That night, I sat in my car for nearly an hour before driving home. The city lights blurred through the windshield, and my heart ached with every passing minute. How could I tell my son something that would break him? And yet how could I not? Truth, once revealed, can't be unlearned. It lives in your chest, restless and heavy, until it demands to be spoken. When Daniel called me later that evening, his voice was full of cheer. "Hey, Mom! You didn't stay long today. Everything okay?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, sweetheart." I was just tired. I couldn't bring myself to say it. Not yet. The truth was still too raw, too sharp. I needed to think. I needed to find a way to protect everyone from the wreckage that was coming. Days turned into weeks. I watched my son dote on Michael, teaching him how to clap, how to giggle, how to say "da-da." Every time I saw them together, my heart broke a little more. Because love like that, innocent, unconditional, doesn't deserve to be shattered by secrets. Clara avoided my eyes whenever I visited. The tension hung between us like smoke. I could see the guilt eating her alive, yet she said nothing. And neither did I. But the world has a way of forcing the truth out, especially when it's buried too deep. It came one night, unexpectedly, through something as simple as a blood test. Michael had fallen ill, nothing serious, just a routine checkup. But the doctor noticed something, a mismatch in the blood types. When Daniel came to me, confusion written all over his face, I knew the moment I'd been dreading had arrived. Daniel came over that night with Michael asleep in his arms and a folder clutched tight in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes glassy, like he'd seen something he couldn't make sense of. I knew before he even spoke that the truth had begun to surface. "Mom," he said quietly, setting the folder on the table, "something's not right. Michael's blood type. It doesn't match mine, or Clara's. The doctor said that's impossible." My heart cracked open. I reached out, covering his trembling hand with mine. "Daniel," I whispered, "before you jump to conclusions, you should talk to Clara. There's something she needs to tell you." He blinked, confused, hurt. "You know something, don't you?" Tears burned behind my eyes. "I do. But it's not my secret to reveal." He stared at me, searching my face for answers I couldn't give. "Mom, please." I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. "Go to her, son. You deserve to hear it from her." When he left, the silence that filled the house was unbearable. I paced the floor for hours, praying for mercy, for understanding, for a miracle. Because once the truth came out, there would be no going back, only pieces to gather, hearts to mend. Later that night, my phone rang. Daniel's voice was broken, trembling with disbelief and betrayal. "She told me," he said. "She told me everything." I closed my eyes, tears streaming freely now. "I'm so sorry, my boy," but he didn't answer. Only silence followed, heavy and hollow, before the call ended. And in that silence I felt it, the moment everything changed. The sound of trust breaking, echoing through generations. For the next few days, Daniel shut the world out. He didn't answer my calls or texts. Clara, too, went quiet. The house that once overflowed with laughter now stood like a haunted place where memories whispered through empty halls. I wanted to rush in, to fix everything the way mothers do, but this wasn't a wound a bandage could heal. This was betrayal, wrapped in years of silence. When Daniel finally showed up at my door, he looked older somehow. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. "She left," he said flatly. "Took Michael to her sister's for a while. I invited him in and made him tea, though neither of us drank it." "What did she say?" I asked softly. He exhaled, long and trembling. "That Michael isn't mine. That she was afraid I'd leave her if she told me. That she convinced herself I'd be a better father than the real one ever could be." He laughed bitterly. "She was right about one thing. I did love that boy more than anything." "Daniel," I said carefully, "you still can. Blood doesn't decide who a father is. Love does. He looked at me then, the pain in his eyes cutting deep. But how do I love without the truth, Mom? How do I trust again? I didn't have an answer. All I could do was take his hand, letting silence say what words couldn't, that even when love breaks, it can still be rebuilt. Later, when he left, I walked into my garden. The night air was cool, and the roses I once planted with Clara were still blooming. I knelt beside them, feeling their petals against my fingertips, and whispered, "Please, let my family find its way back to love." Weeks turned into months. Life moved forward, but the wounds lingered beneath the surface like quiet scars. Daniel focused on work, pouring his pain into long hours in silence. Clara stayed away with Michael, and though I missed them terribly, I understood. Sometimes distance is the only thing that gives broken hearts room to breathe. Every night I prayed, not for things to go back to how they were, but for the strength to accept what they had become. Michael was innocent in all this, a child born into love and lies he never asked for. He deserved the truth someday, but not the bitterness that came with it. Then one morning I found a letter on my doorstep. It was from Clara. Her handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places where tears had fallen. She wrote about the guilt that consumed her, how every day since the truth came out felt like punishment. She said Daniel didn't deserve the pain she caused, and that she'd decided to move back temporarily to give Michael stability. "He still calls Daniel Daddy," she wrote, "and I don't have the heart to correct him." I sat there reading her words, my heart aching. There was no villain here, only broken people trying to protect what they loved in the wrong ways. That evening I called Daniel. "She wants to talk," I told him gently. Not for her sake, but for Michael's. He was silent for a long moment before whispering, "I don't know if I can, Mom." "You don't have to forgive," I said. "Just listen. Sometimes listening is the first step toward healing." And so, a few days later, he agreed to meet her, right here, in the same home where their love once began. When the day came, I made sure the house felt warm again. I baked Daniel's favorite pie, lit the same candle Clara used to love, and opened the curtains wide so sunlight could pour in, because truth should never meet darkness. They arrived separately. Daniel first, quiet and distant, then Clara holding Michael's little hand. The boy's face lit up when he saw his father figure, and without hesitation he ran into Daniel's arms. That moment, pure, innocent, untouched by adult mistakes, brought tears to all our eyes. Daniel held him tight, closing his eyes as though he could freeze time. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, "you've gotten taller." Clara stood there trembling, her lips pressed tight as if holding back everything she wanted to say. Finally, Daniel set Michael down and looked at her. "You wanted to talk," he said, his voice calm but heavy. She nodded. "I don't expect forgiveness," she began. "I just want you to know. I never meant to deceive you. I was scared. I thought I was protecting Michael. And I thought if I loved you enough, it would make everything right. But lies don't disappear with love. They grow under it." Daniel listened in silence. When she finished, he said quietly, "You hurt me, Clara, but you also gave me the best years of my life. And him." He glanced at Michael, smiling faintly. "He's my son, no matter what anyone says." The tears finally broke from Clara's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. In that moment, something shifted. Not full forgiveness, but understanding. The kind that comes when hearts stop fighting and start listening again. And for the first time in months, the house didn't feel like a place of betrayal anymore. It felt like home finding its voice again. After that day, something quiet but powerful began to change between them. There weren't grand apologies or dramatic reunions, just small, human moments stitched together with honesty. Daniel started visiting Clara and Michael a few evenings each week. Sometimes they'd share dinner. Sometimes he just read Michael a bedtime story before heading home. At first, I worried the pain might return, that the reminders of betrayal would reopen every wound. But slowly I realized what was growing between them now wasn't what they'd lost, but what they were learning to rebuild. Truth, as painful as it was, had cleared the air. No more lies. No more guessing. Just fragile honesty, trying to become something steady again. One night Daniel came over after putting Michael to bed. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, quiet for a long while. Then he said, "You were right, Mom. Listening was the first step. I don't know if I'll ever forget, but I can see the good again." I smiled softly. "That's all healing ever asks of us." He nodded, staring at his tea. I realized something else, too. Michael didn't choose any of this. He just loves us. That's what matters. In that moment, I felt the weight I'd been carrying for months begin to lift. Love, when purified by pain, becomes something deeper, wiser. It no longer demands perfection. It simply asks for presence. A few weeks later, Clara came to visit me alone. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for not exposing me that day. You gave me the chance to make things right myself." I held her close, tears rising again. "We all stumble, dear," I said softly. "But it's what we do after the fall that defines who we are." Months passed, and slowly the wounds in our family began to scar over. Not gone, never gone, but gentled by time and forgiveness. Daniel and Clara didn't rush back into marriage. Instead, they learned to be co-parents, to share laughter again without the weight of what was lost. I'd watch them together sometimes, both leaning down to help Michael tie his shoes, and think, this is what redemption looks like. Imperfect, but real. Michael grew, bright and curious, with that same stormy gaze I'd once questioned. Now I saw it differently. His eyes weren't a reminder of betrayal. They were proof that love can bloom in the most complicated soil. Every time he ran into Daniel's arms shouting, "Daddy!" I knew that love had chosen the right home, regardless of blood. One summer evening, the three of them came over for dinner. We sat on the porch, watching the sky melt into shades of gold and lavender. Clara laughed easily again. Daniel's eyes softened when he looked at her. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel fear in the quiet. I felt peace. As the stars came out, Michael climbed into my lap and asked, "Grandma, are you happy?" I looked down at his little face, his innocent eyes reflecting the night sky, and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "I'm happy, because our family learned that truth hurts, but hiding hurts even more. And when we finally faced it, we found something better waiting on the other side, understanding." He smiled sleepily, resting his head against my chest. And in that soft stillness, I realized something else. Forgiveness doesn't erase pain. It transforms it into wisdom. If you've listened all the way to the end, thank you. Stories like this remind us that even when life breaks our hearts, love can still put the pieces back together. If this story touched you, please take a moment to like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It helps our little storytelling family grow, and it means the world to me. Good night, wherever you are. And remember, every truth, no matter how painful, has the power to set you free.